And my group, we looked at the intersection of mobility and place and evaluating the current proposals and their limitations for walkability and bikeability in the transit-oriented community in the Golden Mile area. So this is a Google Earth view of what the current state of the Golden Mile looks like. It's centered along Eglinton Avenue East between Victoria Park Avenue and Warden Avenue in the Scarborough part of Toronto. And as you can see, it is a car-focused area with a lot of parking, and then more parking. An auto-oriented current state exists with wide roads. Eglinton Avenue has painted bicycle lanes that bicycle people like to call bicycle gutters because cars enter them with impunity. There are 50-km/h speed limits, but speeding is there, as well as fast train trucks and vehicles, and there are narrow sidewalks with negligible shade. Regarding public transport, in the next year or so, fingers crossed, a new Line 5 Eglinton line will open in the median of Eglinton Avenue between Mount Dennis in the west and Kennedy Station, which is that big blob there. So that will bring frequent higher order rapid transit to the Golden Mile area. There is existing 10-minute network, so that's service every 10 minutes or better on the Victoria Park 24 bus route until 1 in the morning, and all-day bus routes on Pharmacy, Birchmount, Warden, as well as express buses on Victoria Park and Warden. And there is overnight bus service in the area. So the transit provision is pretty decent using buses currently. Cycle plans, there are plans to upgrade the existing bicycle gutter on Eglinton Avenue East with raised cycle tracks that are staggered below the sidewalk but above the road lane, so it should help with delineation and safety. And improved sidewalks and street trees are planned along Eglinton. Bicycle lanes or cycle tracks, sidewalk improvements, and potentially dedicated bus lanes, which are much needed, are proposed or in evaluation on various streets in the area, such as Victoria Park. There's also talk of new north, south, and east-west local roads, such as a new east-west street that's Golden Mile Boulevard, provisionally named, and that will likely also have cycle tracks or other bike facilities. These are the City of Toronto's complete street guidelines. More protection and delineation would be required on a higher speed and volume road like Eglinton, and you're looking for a divided bike lane that's at least 1.5 to 1.8 meters. At lower speeds, you can get away with a shared car and cycling area where the cars and the bikes are sharing the same area if the speeds are low enough and demand is low enough. Curbside bicycle parking is also recommended. This is a very interesting chart from Oslo's Street Design Manual that outlines how the annual average daily traffic and the nature of the traffic conditions affects what sort of cycling provision is necessary. So for instance, with high average annual daily traffic, speed limits over 30 kilometers an hour and lots of buses, 6 or more, which is achieved by basically every route in the area, and goods traffic over 100 units per day, you want an elevated cycle lane, which is all we have right now. If the traffic is very low, then you can do cycling in mixed traffic with rigid intersections and access roads, a cycle lane for major inclines, and measures to reduce car speeds. So you might not need necessarily delineated cycle tracks on every street in the area, or some of the small local roads like Ashley, if they're given methods to reduce speeds and help enforce a natural 30-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. And then one-way streets, things are slightly different, but we're not going to look at that because there is no one-way streets in the precinct. Jurisdictional comparisons are interesting. Toronto allows a minimum of 1.8 meters for a unidirectional cycle track. Oslo says it has to be at least 2 meters. And New South Wales is, you can get away with 2 meters if and only if you do not have more than 150 cyclists an hour. More than that, you must have 3-meter width for the cycle track and buffer, please, too. Road lane widths vary, with Toronto being from 3.25 to 3.5 meters wider for the curb lanes, but narrower for center streets with low speeds. Oslo's 3.25 meters. New South Wales hits as high as 3.5 meters. Delineation between car and pedestrian space is important, especially at the speeds we're talking about on streets like Victoria Park, Warden, Birchmount, Pharmacy, and Eglinton. And the current delineation is in and out, particularly with the bicycle gutter. So there are a few importable ideas from other jurisdictions that may be useful. One big point of conflict today is between cyclists and buses at transit stops when buses are pulling in to serve customers. One option is with a delineated cycle track to turn the cycle track in so that it wraps around the bus stop waiting area, so people are waiting for the bus on basically an island between the cycle track and the bus lane on the other side, and that way there's no conflict between bus passengers boarding or alighting their vehicle and the cyclists attempting to pass through the area. Pedestrian-only streets in the new development area could help provide a finer-grained street network, because it is very large blocks, former industrial, massive parking lots, but at the same time keep the speeds low and give pedestrians and cycling priority in the area. Vegetation and stormwater management areas is something that's kind of missing from the plan, but we've got a lot of solid spaces, so things like street trees, green swales, stuff like that, to break up the road space, making it less than just a sea of concrete and asphalt. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleagues to talk about future-proofing and climate change.
Hi, I'm Will. I'm going to talk about sort of how we future-proof this area and how they already have attempted to in the plans that are there. So first, I'm going to talk about climate change. So transit communities are inherently, in theory, positive for the environment. The point is to reduce personal vehicle use and resulting in a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. But interestingly enough, it's not in the guiding principles in any of the documents. It's not mentioned, which is quite common for a lot of Ontario municipalities to not mention climate change or anything to do with the climate or emissions. Most likely a political move, because it's more contentious, but it's still really interesting that they just don't mention it at all. All new development in the Golden Mile is going to be subject to the Toronto Green Standards, which, when it comes to green development standards, is pretty good. It's, I wouldn't say the gold standard, but most other municipalities look to Toronto when creating their own green standards. They're pretty thorough. They are mandatory, at least Tier 1, and all of the development within this area is subject to green standards and encouraged to meet the higher level, like the higher performance level, which is optional. But the Toronto Green Standards includes the requirement for energized outlets, for EV charging, bike parking, for both short and long term. This is in development, so in buildings, not the public realm. I believe Toronto does have their own green standards for the city-owned places. It has greenhouse gas emission limits and higher performance buildings, green streets, cool paving, and other measures to help mitigate urban heat island effect. So both the Golden Mile Secondary Plan Study and the Urban Design Guidelines have sections for sustainability. Within the study, it does essentially go through, it's a lot of overlap with Toronto Green Standards, states that developments must create a natural habitat through planting in the privately landscaped areas, preferably with native species, still adhering to the Toronto's guidelines on native species. I think it's 50%, and installing green roofs for most of the residential mid-rise and high-rise buildings. And then making sure the stormwater management techniques are as environmentally friendly as possible, to not just have more concrete and more things that are generally negative for the environment. And while not required, all new development is encouraged to use heat recovery systems, thermal energy networks, both creating new ones and connecting to already built networks, using renewable energy generation, including on-site production. These are not mandatory, they're obviously encouraged. And then there's also the encouragement for street lighting, traffic signals, and other lighting to be use alternative energy sources. For the public realm, so for parks, there is going to be green infrastructure, so rain gardens, bioswales, naturalized trees, just a very naturalized area, still adhering to the guidelines that are set above. And in the urban design guidelines, there is the encouragement of LID, so low impact development techniques. There's an encouragement to retain as many existing trees as possible, and have as much landscaping in private areas. There's not specifics on how much landscaping is wanted. It's just as much as possible, I guess. And encouragement to have the buildings LEED certified. So.
So hi, I'm Cesar Souza, and now I'm going to talk about the impacts following the COVID-19 pandemic in my project. So the main, let's say, data that or the information that we get comes from the Golden Mile Plan study, but it's part of the information that the study was developed in November 2019, so it's before the pandemic. So all the strategies and plans that are there did not consider what we all saw or have seen for the past years. But it's still, when you look at the strategies that were mentioned there, there are some plans that can be related to the post-pandemic behavior shifts, and as Emily mentioned yesterday, for example, they are trying to implement some social and cultural hubs, and now they're considering this, they're taking this more into account specifically because since people are tending to work more from home since 2020, so it would be interesting to have this social space where people can work from home and sometimes take a break or even work with some colleagues or at this social space and then eventually go back to their places. So here, if you see the map that is here, this central part, they're dividing the area into some districts, and the social and cultural hub would be in the central part. In the central part of the area, so so in this case it will be more. It can be related to some of the COVID-19, let's say, changes that we have observed. But still, since there's no plan directly focused on COVID-19 because this plan was developed before, we have also seen some areas of improvement. For example, if you see over there, the blue area, which is the 7th one, it's the employment area, so it's a huge part of the area. So if you think now that most of people are working from home. The culture of working from home is more, has been more developed between all the citizens. We can say that there's a large portion could be reduced. So, for example, they can somehow improve the residential parts or the residential ones, which is the 6 one or even the 2, and implement some more mixed-use buildings where people can live and work at the same building instead of having only buildings directly focused on offices, since people are not working at the offices every day. So having those mixed-use buildings will be more realistic, taking into account that people will sometimes work from home and use their social facilities at the same building to have some meetings or even to socialize with their coworkers if they need, but at the same building, not in a specific place where people will have to go to the office.
Just interestingly, the specific policies within these. Not only is there this large section of employment, which, as we saw yesterday, wasn't there hasn't been any development applications for it yet, but they aren't just allowing it; they are encouraging it. They're incentivizing development, employment in office-specific development through fast-tracking development applications and waiving application fees, and benefit charges for large office developments. Once again, these policies were written before, so hopefully they have changed, but nothing that we could find is that they have changed. So yeah, it's not just that they're allowing it, they're actively incentivizing it. That's up there for you.
And the third part is related to the digital mobilities strategies. So related to this topic specifically, there is a travel demand management TDM plan that has to be developed that can attack, let's say, this part, defining, for example, some areas and some ways to improve, for example, by sharing or car sharing the area. So it says in this study that this TDM should be developed. But also, they mentioned that they want to implement those eco-mobility hubs, which are represented here in this map. So they are one-stop service points for multimodal systems, which includes bike sharing, ride sharing, and car share facilities. So we can see here that they are thinking about those new transportation not facilities, these new transportation modes, let's say, that were developed in the last decades, which comes into digital mobility, since most of the, for example, ride sharing modes are driven by cell phone apps and so on. So it's based on that. And also, it's mentioned in this study that there are wayfinding opportunities in new streetscape design and public and procurement and art procurement. So we saw this, through this, we can see that there's a potential for new technologies. Since, for example, if you think about the area, the study area, if they want to implement Wi-Fi structures, it'd be interesting, for example, instead of putting some regular signs of where to find places, it would be interesting if you think about something more modern, something more technological, advanced, to develop, for example, applications where we can, for example, scan a QR code and then can be directly sent to, let's say, Google Maps to find the best location. So it would be interesting to have this new wayfinding technologies in the place, and there's a potential to do this within the area, and then it could be more technological, let's say, improvement. It could be a more technological improvement in this. And also, by the Toronto Green Standards, it says that 13% of parking spaces need to be energized. So thinking about that, and also think that most of the future digital mobilities cover electric bikes. It shows also a potential area to implement digital mobilities related to biking. Since if this requirement exists, they will probably develop those facilities nearby, and those digital mobility apps related to bike will be also implemented in the area to fulfill this requirement. So thank you. So pass the word to my colleagues.
Hi everyone. So right now I'm going to talk about the evaluation of viability and walkability, and India will talk about bikeability. And based on our finding from those research papers, we find some of the common indicators for the walkability. And in this page, those two indexes are used in the research papers a lot, because some research is created the mathematical way to calculate the index based on the four indicators, and those two kind of index, they all consider those four indicators, but however there's a different mathematical way to calculate the result. And the next page is the indicators. We use them to explain the situation to the public more easier, and it's easier for them to understand those indicators. And usually we will consider about the density, diversity, and also the factors related to design, and also how we're going to access the destination, and what was the distance we need to consider to evaluate how people it's easier to walk to the transit services, and also like the parking supply and cost around that specific area. It's also will be considered to the impact on walkability. And
I think we should update the slide.
You might just need to refresh it so you can see it in the refresh. Yeah, okay. Just refresh the page.
Just refresh the page.
On the top?
No, we
Yeah.
should not
Yeah, I'll just refresh it. Sorry, it's a live document, so I should have access to it. It's just
the slide. Yeah, sorry about it. The slide is not updated before. And in this page, we consider about the climate change, and also the rapid change environment, and the first thing we consider about the climate change in the future. It can impact the percentage of the rain, or if the temperature of the weather, in the summer, we have more hot days or not, and all during the 1 year, if we have the more the rain happen during that day, so those factors were going to impact on the choice how people prefer to walk out. So we are thinking about the indicator of the shading area, and that, for example, in the summer, if the day is too hot and it's very sunny, the people can have more a shading area, and they prefer to walk out during that day. So this will be one of the main factors in the future to impact the people's like the traveling behavior. And also we discussed about the type of retail store, because the type of retail store will going to like change people to walk around that area or try to drive the car to those retail stores. Because in the Costco, the people will purchase a lot of stuff and products, and they prefer to drive the vehicle and bring them back to home. However, if you just want to purchase several small items, we can use a backpack or reusable bag to carry them and bring them to home. So the type of retail store and the number of retail store in that area will be one indicator to impact people on the choice of walking or driving. And we also consider in the winter, in the snow day, the frequency of municipal service, like how the municipal service people will clean the sidewalk, if they can make good management, clean the snow sidewalk, and that will be good for people to walk on the road in the after the snow day, and this is another indicator of the walkability. And yeah, and so basically those indicators we find so far, and I pass to the Gandia to talk about the bikeability. Yeah, thank you very much.
Hello everyone. So one of the most important indicators in regards to bikeability is the connectivity in general. So when we look at the Golden Mile bikers, we think about how safe it's going to be for bikers to be encouraged to use bikes. One of the parts that is very important is the number of intersections with respect to the signalized intersections, meaning that they have indicates a more safer environment for bikers in general. Also, another important indicator is the number of intersections in general in the Golden Mile part, and we are expected to look at how safe it's going to be with respect. So we're looking also into the bikers' perspective, or how the bikers are going to be encouraged to be using bikes in order to cycle. Also, yesterday we have spoken about the environment. So in general, the environment, yesterday Amir mentioned that they are putting in place more greenery places, and this will also help encourage Golden Mile bikers to use bikes. Also, the air quality in this is also another important indicator when we speak about the environment. The land use mix index developers to use bikes in general and to have it a more environmental friendly environment, just like not what we have seen yesterday. So thank you guys, thank you everyone for listening to us, and that should be it.
Okay, so we'll open the floor for Q&A. So if the entire team wants to just come up, we'll take a picture of the whole group, and then we'll open up the floor for any Q&A as well. I'll get your picture. Sorry. Okay. Look here, look at me here. Yeah. No, I got it. Okay. Okay, thanks. Okay, any questions from the audience?
Great work, guys. You really did a lot of research and you really dug into so many different documents. I thought it was really interesting to see. And I think there were a lot of parallels. So I think if you had another hour, probably you could integrate it a little bit to the extent to really have come up with recommendations where you add those different parts, right? Climate change, land use mix, your research on different street guidelines, and then also the research on indicators. I think I have a couple of sort of technical questions, but if you, maybe the first would be, we were thinking about how could especially this sort of secondary street network look like in the Golden Mile, which is inside, the Golden Mile Boulevard. And based on what you've been sort of researching, what would be the number one recommendation for each of you, perhaps because you have different angles on it, that you would suggest that developers should really take care that they need to integrate in order to make this a vivid, lively boulevard that is really inviting for walking and cycling, and not what we were hearing from Maddie yesterday, in Bonn, essentially another car-dependent island of high-rise. So from the expertise that you've gathered in the last 2 days, what would be your personal sort of recommendation in order to make this a lively boulevard?
I can go first. I think having green cover. I think making sure street trees are also prepared in a way that they're going to thrive and not die in 5 years, which is often the case. Making sure that people love the older parts of Toronto that have these old trees that create this tree canopy. So it's shaded, it's just nicer to walk, and it works for these interior streets that are largely residential, more local roads. So I think just ensuring that there's a good green cover throughout these streets that could easily actually have it. It's really not a problem for it to be there. It's just a matter of if the developers are willing to put the money in, which is, I think, the hardest part, but it's on the city to force them as much as they can.
I would say one thing, and this is not something we really looked at, I guess you did a little bit, but about one thing would be the variety of retail uses that are at grade off of these small streets. One thing I would say is not every street needs to have cars on it. You could have a lot of pedestrian streets, like some of those small north-south roads, little pocket parks or destinations to make people who might be walking through the area have a reason to cut through some of these streets, and the right road design to encourage any vehicles for some of those roads. Like I could see the East-West Street being a major one where you probably have some underground parking garage or some delivery bays off of that street. But even then, having the right bike lane design, the right narrowness of the roads to ensure that the traffic behaves in the right way to integrate with our pedestrians and cyclists in the area.
And I would also add, still in this topic of limiting the car circulation in general in the area. And as I mentioned, prioritize those on-demand services so people can really rely, and they don't need to rely on their cars often, only if they really need. And also to try to restrict some areas to pedestrians, as Jack said, and also, but also to areas where, for example, those on-demand service can enter and not like private vehicles. So it will be like the traffic in general in the area will be more organized, let's say. People will be more comfortable in, for example, in circulating within the area without worrying too much about traffic.
Yeah, that's really. Would you add something?
Sorry, he has a question, I don't know.
Yeah. Oh, were you still contributing? Sorry if I cut you.
You can go ahead, no problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were done. So I saw you were trying to draw some insights or lessons from European countries, right?
Oslo, which is in Norway, that's in Europe,
Yeah.
and New South Wales, which is in Australia, which is not in Europe.
Okay, so thanks for that. So you're trying to draw lessons from non-North American countries. With what you've gathered so far, what challenges would you think you would face when you're trying to implement such strategies in North American context? Because even if you look at the urban planning paradigms currently and even over the last few decades, is slightly different. You have these European countries tend to be denser, support active lifestyles compared to North American cities. So looking at this.
So I wouldn't say necessarily that's true.
Okay.
Oslo, for instance, the country of Norway's only got a little over 5 million people. We're not talking about density. You know, we could put everyone in Norway in Toronto, and that would still be less people than we've got in the GTHS. So it's not necessarily as hard as we think. You know, I think a lot of it, some of it comes down to culture in the planning and engineering of these facilities to consider those options, to consider what other places do, to consider speeds or lane widths, and not, sometimes we can get into a bit of a rut and sort of churn out the same roads every day and kind of just forget things. The other thing I'd say is that the designs are surprisingly similar. You know, like the road lane widths are all around the same, 3.25, you know, maybe we're a tad wider, Australia's a bit wider, you know, the cycling lane widths, yeah, okay, we're a little bit conservative, other places, you know, we have a bit more lane width, but they're all generally in the same vicinity, so there's less difference than we see, and it's more about, shall we say, putting it into practice and initiating that, and then the whole design and upkeep of that, doing those designs.
Yeah, I can just add a point. Because when you think about North American cities, obviously you're taking our example in Toronto, but you think about North America, including the US in general, it's a really car-oriented culture, really strong, where it sometimes it gets reflected into Latin America, because I'm from Latin America, I know that this is also strong there. So I think one of the challenges here is just because when you compare to European countries, they have a less car-oriented mentality and culture. They tend to be more into active transportation modes, and they think more beyond, outside the car perspective. So I think one of the challenges here is also that because normally people tend to be, cars tend to be related to success, right? When you're successful in your life, you buy a car and you build a family and so on. Now, this is the normal North American mentality and culture. Obviously, that has been changed a lot, but it is still a thing, let's say, within the transportation field, and that has to be more worked and also debated. That's what I think.
All right, thank you.
So adding to my friends as well, one of the parts that is also an interesting key point is because they have still not had this major changes in the road, is in regards to the intersections, as I earlier mentioned, meaning cyclists, they're more concerned about wide intersections or intersections that are not signalized. So since they are in the early ages or stages, of development, one of the key points or key parts that they need to consider is how to have a road design that is pedestrian friendly, that is cyclist friendly, to help